Every town has a house the neighbors pretend not to see. A house where curtains never move, where the air tastes like dust and secrets, where something inside is always awake. On Rosewood Lane, that house still stands. People say it's just old wood and bad wiring, but if you listen closely on a quiet night, you can hear it breathe. You can hear the attic. Decades ago, a family lived here, a mother who sewed lullabies into fabric, 2 children who played in the light of the window, and a father whose love turned into something darker. Then one night, the fire came, and no one ever saw them again. The records say the house is empty, but the walls, they remember. Tonight you'll hear what they've been whispering all these years, and when you do, you'll understand why no one stays on Rosewood Lane for long. The house waited for me long before I ever saw it. From the end of Rosewood Lane, it slouched behind an iron gate, its windows dull like blind eyes, paint peeled from its bones in long white strips, and ivy crawled across the porch as if trying to hold the place together. The realtor called it a bargain with potential, though her smile twitched when the wind rattled the shutters. I told myself I needed a change, that 4 faded walls could swallow the noise of a past I was still running from. The mortgage was cheap, too cheap. When I stepped through the door, the air felt thick, damp with age, tasting faintly of rust and lilac perfume. My footsteps echoed longer than they should have, as though the halls repeated them a half-second late. Dust floated through a shaft of sunlight, turning in slow spirals that looked too deliberate. The staircase curved upward into shadow, and somewhere above, a floorboard creaked in answer to my arrival. The realtor flinched. "Old houses breathe," she said quickly, but her voice lacked conviction. In the hallway, a cold draft sighed across my neck. I turned, expecting an open window, but everything was sealed tight. When I looked up, the attic hatch in the ceiling quivered slightly, like someone had just moved beyond it. Later that evening, as I signed the papers in the empty living room, the house settled again with a groan that sounded suspiciously like relief. Out of habit, I looked toward the attic door. For an instant, I thought I saw the outline of a hand pressed against the wood from the other side, small, childlike, waiting. Small towns keep their ghosts in file cabinets. The next morning I drove to the Rosewood Municipal Library, chasing a rumor the realtor had brushed aside. A family disappeared here once. The librarian, a woman built of whispers and cardigans, hesitated when I asked about the address. "That house," she murmured, already rummaging through yellowed clippings. "You don't want to know its story," but she handed me a brittle folder. Anyway, inside was a newspaper dated 1956, family of 4, missing, Lane mystery. The photograph froze time, a man in suspenders, his wife in pearls, 2 children grinning from the porch I now owned. The caption named them Henry Kane, his wife Evelyn, and their children Alice and Ben. According to police, the family vanished one rainy night without packing a single bag. The attic door had been bolted from the outside. When officers broke in, the room was empty, except for hundreds of words carved into the beams, prayers, fragments of lullabies dot every few years. The article said, "The property sold cheap to someone new. None stayed longer than a winter." I scanned the final paragraph and felt my stomach clench. Investigators found one final name etched deeper than the rest, as though the knife had bitten until wood turned black. The name was blurred by time but faintly legible beneath the ink. Evan Hart, my own. The librarian noticed the color drain from my face. "Coincidence?" she offered softly. But when I thanked her and turned to leave, she added, almost to herself, "Houses like that don't forget their families. They just wait for them to come back." Nights came heavier in Rosewood Lane. The house had a rhythm, a pulse beneath its timber skin. During the day, sunlight softened its edges, but when darkness settled, something inside began to breathe. The wind outside would die, leaving an impossible silence. Then, almost tenderly, the ceiling would start to murmur. It wasn't creaking from age, it was deliberate, like a language made of wood and air. I woke one night at exactly 2:14 a.m. The whisper came again, sliding down through the beams above my bed. It was faint, feminine, fragile. I strained to hear the words, Ben, Alice, Evelyn. It repeated the names in a loop until my heartbeat matched its tempo. I realized there was one name missing: Henry, the father, the one whose face had been scratched out in every record. Gripping my flashlight, I climbed halfway up the attic stairs. The air grew colder, the light from my phone flickering as if something unseen walked beside me. "Hello." My voice barely broke the silence. For a moment, nothing. Then a sound like a sigh answered, followed by a thud, above slow, heavy, and human. I froze. The temperature dropped further, my breath now visible. A final whisper slipped through the crack under the attic door. "Don't let him in again." The light in my hand blinked out completely. In the dark, the ceiling seemed to inhale, and I understood that whatever lived in the attic wasn't waiting to be found, it was listening, deciding if I belonged. The mirror had been there all along, tall and cracked at the edges, nailed to the wall at the top of the staircase. For days I walked past it without really looking, until one night it caught me, literally stopped me mid. My reflection seemed to lag, just a fraction, but enough to make my stomach tighten. When I leaned closer, the surface quivered faintly, as though something behind the glass had exhaled. That night, I dreamed of a woman humming softly while sewing under a bare bulb. Her hands moved mechanically, her eyes fixed on something unseen beyond the frame. Behind her stood two children, a boy and a girl, smiling too wide. When I awoke, my throat hurt, my pulse frantic. The air smelled faintly of iron, the way old coins taste when held too long. The next evening, I passed the mirror again, and this time my reflection wasn't alone. A family stood faintly behind Mevelyn with her sewing, the children laughing soundlessly, and there, half in shadow, was Henry. His eyes were dark pits, his mouth a thin, deliberate smile. As I watched, he stepped closer until his face pressed against the glass, and the surface cracked from his lips outward. The shatter echoed through the house like a gunshot. The lights flickered. In the mirror's fractured pieces, the family's faces broke apart, scattering across my reflection. Henry's eyes, however, remained intact. They watched me, alive and furious, from every shard. The discovery began with an uneven patch of wallpaper in the upstairs hallway. It bulged slightly, a soft square beneath the floral print. I peeled it back, expecting rot. Instead, I found the outline of a sealed door. The wood beneath was scorched, black veins spreading outward like frost. Someone had painted over it, not to hide it, but to forget. It took hours to pry open. The hinges screamed, shedding rust and dust. The smell inside was unbearable, a mix of ash, mildew, and something older, heavier, like trapped breath. The room had once been a bedroom. Now it was a tomb. A bed frame half burnt, a chair facing the window, rope still hanging above it. The wallpaper blistered and peeled from heat, long extinguished. On the floor, beneath a pile of debris, I found a diary half consumed by fire. The writing, jagged and frantic, read, "They whisper while I sleep. Evelyn forgives to eyes. The children don't understand. I must keep them quiet. Together forever." I turned the last page carefully. A single sentence scorched itself into my memory. "Forgive me when you hear them again." That night, I dreamed of Henry's chair creaking softly as someone invisible sat down. The rope swayed gently in the darkness above my bed. When I woke, my ceiling light was swinging, and faint black dust fell from above us, or something pretending to be. Sleep became an illusion. Every night, I felt the house wake before I did. It began with a soft patter above, like small feet crossing the attic floor. Then whispers, two voices, childlike, singing a broken lullaby. One night, the melody slipped through the vents and into my room. The sound was both comforting and unbearable, a harmony soaked in grief. At 3:07 a.m., I heard laughter, light, playful, echoing down the hallway. My door creaked open slowly, though no wind blew. A faint glow spilled from the attic stairs, a warm amber light that shouldn't have existed. My body moved before reason caught up. I followed. Halfway up the steps, the air thickened. The laughter stopped. Then a figure appeared at the tap, a woman in a tattered nightgown, face pale as candle wax. Evelyn. Her presence radiated sorrow, not malice. She reached a trembling hand toward me, her lips forming a warning. "He's coming." Behind her, two smaller shapes flickered like dying flames. The children clung to her skirt, their eyes hollow yet pleading. I could barely breathe as a low groan spread through the floorboards. The attic door began to open by itself, inch by inch, as if pulled by unseen hands. Evelyn's face twisted with terror. "He found a new family," she whispered. The light flared, blinding. When my vision cleared, they were gone. Only the attic door remained open, wide and waiting, the dark behind it pulsing like a living heartbeat. It started with the smell of smoke, faint at first, like someone burning paper in another room. By the time I reached the stairs, the air shimmered with heat. I looked up. Orange light leaked from the attic hatch, flickering as if flames danced just beyond sight. Panic clawed at me, but some force pulled me upward, step by step, until I stood before the open door. Inside, fire crawled along the walls, devouring the old furniture, the toys, the memories. Yet the heat didn't burn me. It only hummed, vibrating against my chest. In the center stood Henry Kane, the rope still draped around his neck, his eyes black and endless. "You moved in," he said. "That makes you mine." The children appeared behind him, their small faces trembling between sorrow and obedience. Evelyn stood apart, her voice breaking as she reached for me. "End it. Set us free." I grabbed the charred matchbox from the floor, my hands shaking. The word forever was etched into its lid. I struck a match, its tiny flame defiant against the inferno. The fire roared, consuming sound itself. Henry screamed a noise that wasn't human. The room convulsed, the walls splintering under invisible pressure. Then silence. The flames vanished, leaving only cold air and falling ash. The rope lay on the floor beside me. On the wall above, 4 shadows lingered for a moment, then dissolved, their outlines merging into light. When I opened my eyes, sunlight was bleeding through cracks in the attic boards. The air was cold and sharp, the kind of stillness that follows a scream. The walls were untouched, no scorch marks, no smoke, no proof of what I'd seen. Only the faint scent of burned wood clung to my clothes. The rope that once hung from the beam was gone. In its place, a diary lay open on the floor. The last page had changed. The ink was still wet, shimmering faintly as if written by invisible hands. "We're free." I staggered down the stairs, dizzy and trembling. Every mirror in the house had shattered overnight. Fragments glittered across the floor like spilled ice, reflecting pieces of a family that no longer existed. In each shard, faces blinked back at me, Evelyn's soft eyes, Alice's shy smile, Ben's laughter frozen in glass. But when I blinked, they vanished, leaving only my reflection and the hollow behind my eyes. Outside, the world looked painfully ordinary. Birds sang, the wind moved icily again. I stood on the porch, expecting relief, but what came instead was grief, heavy, unshakable, like I'd buried people I'd never met. As I turned to lock the door one last time, something caught my attention. In the attic window, faint against the light, a family stood together. Evelyn held her children close, their faces calm, almost grateful. Henry wasn't there. I whispered goodbye, and for the first time, the house didn't whisper back. Weeks passed. The for sale sign returned to the lawn, bright against the grey paint. I drove by every morning on my way to work, unable to stop myself. The windows were empty now, the house expressionless. Still, I felt it watching, patient as ever. Then one afternoon, a black sedan pulled into the driveway. A young couple stepped out laughing, holding hands, radiant with the kind of optimism only strangers can afford. They toured the porch, peered into the living room, pointed toward the attic window. I parked down the street and watched helplessly, fingers digging into the steering wheel. The agent's voice floated through the breeze. "It has character, great bones, plenty of history." The husband smiled. The wife nodded. My throat tightened around the warning. I couldn't speak. Some truths sound like madness when said out loud. That as the couple stepped inside, the door creaked open without a touch. They didn't notice. From the attic window, the curtains stirred slightly, though the air outside was still. The woman looked up, brow furrowed. "Did you hear that?" she asked. "Just the house settling," her husband replied, smiling. But the house wasn't settling. It was waking, and when I drove away, the attic window shone faintly in my rearview mirror. For a moment, I saw a man's silhouette, their broad shoulders, a rope's mark faintly glowing around his neck. He raised his head slowly and smiled. And though I left Rosewood Lane behind that night, I swear I still hear its soft whispers in the walls whenever I try to sleep, calling my name as if the house remembers exactly who set it free.